We're excited to have Stephanie Kusie, Member of Parliament, Calgary Midnapore, on the show today with Real Talk Live. For those of you who are new to Real Talk Live, we have two different types of programs that we do. One, we bring in entrepreneurs and business leaders, talk about their history, their experiences, and their successes and failures. On Real Talk Live, which is what we're on right now, we bring in business leaders and influential individuals, such as our Member of Parliament here, and Stephanie will be talking about what's happening from a governmental perspective. So Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Faisal, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, there's been a big issue with this pandemic. Stephanie, I think what we need to have from your perspective, what's happening in regards to where the government is in this pandemic?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. Of course, being a member of the official opposition, we feel that they were a little slow off the start for the public health and safety response. We think they should have closed the border a lot sooner. We think that they should have been monitoring the incoming flights a lot sooner. And in fact, I read a report yesterday that 26 international flights have arrived in the last 2 weeks with someone with COVID-19. So, this is still occurring. But once they got into the swing of the public health and safety perspective, recognized the threat that this really was, they did okay. We certainly have criticized them for other things, such as not responding to the concerns sooner when we saw this rising out of China. As you know, they sent over a significant amount of personal protective equipment to China, which didn't show a lot of foresight in terms of what we would face here eventually. But as I said, once they recognized the magnitude of what was happening, I think the federal government, and more specifically the provincial governments, really started to take this seriously, really started to do what they had to do. So from the public health and safety perspective, I think we saw a move into the economic support perspective, right? And so the government had to respond very quickly to a number of individuals and businesses that were going to require serious help. And I would say for the most part, they did a good job of responding quickly. We as the official opposition did our best to really evaluate the programs. I'm the Shadow Minister for Families, Children, and Social Development. So for me, it was monitoring the charity work, the Canada Child Benefit, those types of things as well, the outcomes for seniors. And they did a good job. I was actually amazed by the response with the help of the Canada Revenue Agency of the time, how little time it took for them to get assistance out, particularly regarding the CERB. The other business programs, not as much, and we'll talk about that a bit more. But generally speaking, a pretty good response, but I take credit as a member of the official opposition for really recognizing those gaps and those lapses and helping the government to identify those at that time. But now, as we start to come out of this pandemic, as we see different provinces moving into stages 2 and even 3, of course, now with limitations, but still moving forward as a society, I really haven't seen from the federal government an economic recovery plan. And I think that is just so incredibly important. I'm sure you've heard, Faisal, over and over again, the lines from our caucus over this last week. We have the highest unemployment rate in the G7, the only nation who doesn't have the AAA credit rating. And of course, we're reaching $1 trillion of debt, and a high 343, I think was the number of the deficit scheduled, 343,353 for this year. So, I mean, it is, we really need to start to think about economic recovery. As a foreign service officer, for me, that means on every level. I think we have to look at, frankly, if I was the Prime Minister, I would be doing a national inventory of all of our products, everything from agriculture to textiles to minerals to the great energy we have in here in this province, as well as evaluating our production capacity to really get an idea of what we have excess of and are able to trade. And I think we're going to see the trade patterns change in the world as we come out of this pandemic, based upon different things. A former heavy reliance on China, I don't think nations will want to rely on China as much as they did, but also whichever nations can recover the fastest. And I think that will include an evaluation as to a vaccine when that arrives, how quickly we see that different nations develop their supply chains, and as well their access to capital. So Canada will have to think about then who they want to trade with, and then of course what we're able to produce internally, and of course with the consideration of the personal protection equipment going forward. So I would say the government has yet to really consider that. I haven't seen them give any consideration to this at a federal level. Here in Alberta, of course, Jason Kenney released his economic plan. I think it's very strong. I am Jason Kenney's successor, if you will, in the riding of Calgary Midnapore here. So no doubt I'm a big fan. But all to say, I would say the government has done a decent job at the federal level of responding to the safety, to responding to the economic support, almost too good a job. Again, I have no idea how we're going to get out of this debt and this deficit, but we have to start planning for it at the federal level. And that's why I did my Economic Recovery Taskforce, Faisal, which I know you're interested about here today, was to at least start at that micro level, what has to happen in our community here. And I'm hoping that it'll give some ideas to the federal government as well.
Let's take it, Stephanie, to the micro level within Alberta, or just the business owners in general. What we're finding is that business owners are dealing with the health issue. They are worried about their staff. They've been shut down. They're trying to recover. They're trying to open up their business and start to deal with this new normal. What can the government do from this point going forward to help these businesses quickly recover? Because this is going to be a catastrophe if we don't get back these business owners on their feet.
No, you're definitely correct. And I, as we talked to different small businesses across Calgary Midnapore, we saw that there were a number of concerns, everything, frankly, from operations, making sure that there is enough cash and credits to survive. In one of our surveys, 29% of businesses said that they don't anticipate to be able to last longer than 3 months based on the amount of cash and credit that they have. They're worried about talent. They're worried about getting back the employees that they had to release. And they're also worried about supply chains, specific again to that personal protective equipment, what they're going to do. So based upon all of the conversations that I had, my task force, I should say, had with small businesses and small business owners being members of the task force, we really looked at the existing government programs and thought about how to tweak those relative to those problems that I mentioned: operations, talent, and supply chains. So, for example, there's been a lot of uncertainty regarding the wage subsidy. So businesses, as you know, needs stability and certainty in an effort to continue to function. And so we recommended that the federal government extend the wage subsidy program through the end of the year. And lo and behold, thank goodness, they announced that they were going to do that. So that's certainly one good thing that the government can and did do. We had a lot of conversations about the rental program and how difficult that was, because of course it's currently only for the 3 months, covering 50% of the rent, 25% by the tenant, and 25% by the landlord of the funds that are due. But the struggle is that it has to be landlord initiated. And so even if the government made it possible for the tenant to initiate this process, that would be something that would be very helpful for that program as well. In regards to talent, for example, we talked about the CERB, which has just had incredible take up. And I'll add, Faisal, that another project I'm doing in addition to the Economic Recovery Task Force is I'm actually doing another project where I am doing a support summary for the riding of Calgary Midnapore so that I can have an accurate snapshot as to how many constituents required the CERB, how many small businesses in my riding needed the CEBA, and what those dollar amounts are, and as well the reasons for them to really get a good grip on that. So that's another project that I'm doing in addition to this one. But going back to the CERB, as I mentioned, we're hearing from a lot of businesses that it's being very difficult, has been very difficult for them to obtain employees once again, given that there is the possibility to stay on CERB, given that it has been extended, and in some cases, the $2,000 benefit may be more than some individuals might make it a job. So I was planning on doing a petition by small business owners. That was my plan. But we, as the official opposition, of course, came up with the idea of the back to work bonus, which from 2,000, you start with the original 1,000, but then from 2,000 to 5,000, the amount you make, you get 50 cents on the dollar. So it sort of weans you off the CERB. And that is the other thing that we heard from businesses, is that there has to be a CERB exit program. That right now there is just it's uncertain. It's like a cliff. When the CERB stops, then what happens then? And there has to be more attention paid to that at a local level. And then regarding the emergency business account, we still see many businesses falling through the cracks, and we are seeing some sector-specific businesses which are still really struggling, even with the CEBA, including food, restaurant, entertainment, tourism. And we think there needs to be maybe more sector-specific attention given to these businesses, perhaps through, say, a sliding scale. And as well, we have found that there should be a unique circumstances portal available. That sometimes it's just too difficult to obtain answers. And as I've seen with so many of these programs, when you're trying to address the gaps, all the different permeations that exist, but a specific line for unique circumstances. So, those are just some of the recommendations that came out of the report that we did. But I mean, it's definitely a grim picture, Faisal. There's no doubt about it. 38% of our Calgary Midnapore businesses had to lay off some or all staff during the pandemic, and 42% of businesses in Calgary Midnapore think that having the funds to pay for operating expenses will be their primary challenge in the coming months. So to answer your initial question, I'd say we've done a real evaluation with businesses. I had 22 businesses participate in the task force, along with MLA Richard Gottfried and Councillor Peter Demong. And we had 2 meetings. And in addition to that, we sent out 2 surveys. And one went constituency-wide for anyone to respond, and the other one was more targeted to small businesses. So, I feel we really had an opportunity to talk to small businesses of all types, from all sectors, across the riding. But I do believe that our findings would be uniform across the country in many regards, that small businesses in Saskatchewan or Ontario or Nova Scotia might be having these same types of problems and challenges, and that these tweaks need to be made. But it's all I can say is that it is not an easy path forward, and therefore, in doing this, Canada really needs an economic recovery plan itself.
One of the biggest challenges that business owners are talking about in this city specifically is that, as though they've been receiving some sort of benefits, they've been receiving some sort of compensation or money coming their way to help them with their business, the landlord-tenant issues and so forth, then all of a sudden the city has to raise their property taxes, and now they're getting hit from the other side. And today was released a program from the federal government to help the provinces and lower level governments to give money to the cities, but it had a whole bunch of conditions, and it doesn't hit For example, the city of Calgary. We have a deficit in this city that we're tough to match, and which the only way we can cover that is by raising either residential or property taxes for business owners, I'm referring to as well. And that's a problem for me, because you take out of one pocket and put it in the other, you're not further ahead. Don't we need this federal government to start pushing money right to the cities, say no more increases in taxes? In fact, we should be taking the tax load off them and give them that benefit, so these businesses can have one less thing they have to pay for, because this is another issue that they're dealing with. And I don't see this federal government or any opposition coming out and saying, let's pay this for these business owners so they can actually make not a profit, but let's try break even. Let's try getting as many businesses to break even as much as possible. I think that's what is missing. I'd love your thoughts on that concept, or that idea.
Yeah, well, my thoughts are, for sure, we're already seeing this. I believe we're seeing already in this year's residential taxes an increase because of the vacancy rates downtown. And then, of course, we start to get into the energy conversation, which I could go on and on about, in terms of how this federal government has done nothing to support the natural resources sector. And, I'm a big fan of Calgary Economic Development. I'm a big fan of the report that they did last year. But I think oil and gas isn't a or, I think it's an and, along with the new developing economy. But, to your point, I was very disappointed to see City Council increase increase taxes during this time of a pandemic. Definitely, it's Faisal, you come back to one of the basic ideas, in my opinion, about conservatism is there is no such thing as a free lunch. The money has to come from somewhere. Even that's another thing we heard from the task force, is that the CEBA loan, for example, this isn't it's a loan. It is not a gift. It's a loan. And in addition to getting back on their feet, recovering lost revenue from before, in an effort to survive as a business, they're going to have to pay back this funding as well. So, we've been saying, as the official opposition, that the government has not done, the federal government has not done a good job in the last few years of putting us in a good position. We've had consistent deficits. You've heard this story over and over again. The Prime Minister said he was going to balance the budget, when he got elected by 2019, and that didn't happen. And then now, as I said, our debt is now approached $1 trillion, and this is really why I say, the money has to come from somewhere. It doesn't grow on trees. And that is why we need an economic recovery plan from the government. And, in doing this one with Calgary Midnapore, as I said, it's more addressing the supports which the government has given. But as I said, for me, it really starts at a higher level, at a higher federal level, doing that evaluation that I talked about in terms of all sectors, all resources, all production capacity, reevaluating our trade as we see a sort of we hear global reset or global acceleration. I think it's both, and I really think it all comes back. It all scales down from there. So, I don't think at the federal level, as I said, we are seeing the recovery happen, an economic recovery plan happen at all. And, me in doing this report is really evaluating the supports that we have seen. But I think a lot more has to be done by the government to really boost those different sectors and get the economy going again. And obviously here in Calgary, I think specifically of oil and gas. So it's not a good picture, but we weren't in a good place to start when this pandemic happened. As I said, the government did a decent job of giving out supports, but we had the cases where there may be CERB fraud, and then I could start to get even into things like the WE scandal, which of course is frontline news for conservatives here today. But it's like it's a long path forward. But the thing is, as I said, I don't see the federal government doing what they need to do at this time, and even how unfortunate that this WE scandal has to act as a distraction to the real work which should be going on right now, which is really evaluating getting the economy going again.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's a
you know,
media
I'm
thing,
trying to
Stephanie.
do,
I think the media is putting a lot of energy on that. Here's what I
yeah,
think what's happened for the average Canadian. They received the CERB program, so they've had some sort of guaranteed income. Taxable, but guaranteed.
yep,
Then the federal government announced a couple of other programs for students, gave them
students,
money.
yep,
Then they made an announcement
yep,
for seniors, those who are receiving old age security, they gave them a top up.
yep,
This was all income. This was not a loan to
yep.
anybody. But when it came to business owners, they kind of said, screw you, you're going to get a loan. Why not give some basic revenue to every company? So now they've got something to work with, and then they can target certain areas, no different than they targeted students and seniors in their action plan. And I think that's what maybe
Yeah.
the opposition needs to kind of present to the federal government or start to rally for that, because these business owners are not going to be able to survive if we kick the can down the road and we got to pay this loan off. And they've deferred their mortgages and they've deferred their tax payments. Like, I would hate for to be a business owner with all these bills come October, November, December, and now you're like, I got to start hiring again. I got to pay more expenses to get customers to come into my business. It is an uphill battle, and it seems like this federal government is saying we're not pro-business.
Well, and again, I would say as a member of the official opposition, I mean, we have never believed this federal government to be pro-business, pro-small business in particular. I mean, when we look back at the changes that they tried to make in 2017, in terms of retirement income, or trying to pass on your business to a member of your family, all of those taxes that they attempted to implement on small business, which we were so active about. This is definitely not the federal government of small business or of business, and I think you make a very good point there in terms of further evaluating what businesses really need, because you're right. Everyone else did get their support, be it the CERB, or you mentioned the student, and even my goodness, even with the seniors programs, those who didn't even need it. I know, my parents received it as an example, and they're certainly not in a position where they need it. So I think you're right. But as I said, we have never thought that this is the government of business or of small business. I mean, if we look historically with the government, this government again, right? Who gets money? Loblaws for refrigerators. MasterCard got money from them. Media, journalists, all these payouts there. Like it's yeah, it is. I'm telling you, I come from a small business background, Faisal, and my family has had a small business in this city for close to 50 years now, and it's really hard to make it. And having tried to have two or three of my own small businesses, it is really hard to make a buck. And in fact, Kim Moody, in his webinar today for his book launch, he said that he is actually having a workshop this weekend for those Canadians who want to consider becoming non-residents, and he already has 200 registrants lined up, if you can believe it. And he says that wealth is leaving this country at an alarming pace. And I mean, we've seen this with exit of so many businesses, and of course, who can forget the infamous Murray Edwards, his exit. But all to say that you're right, this is not a business friendly environment. It pains me every day to be a member of parliament here in Alberta with this government's attitude towards the natural resources sector. And my husband works in the natural resources sector, because of the futility we see with things like Bill Bill C-69 and the carbon tax, all of these things. I could go on and on, but you're right. It has been blow after blow for business, I should say, in Alberta, even before this, with the natural resources sector specifically, with those attempts on the small business taxes in 2017. And, we sure could use a turnaround. So your point is well taken with me that businesses need more support because everyone else certainly did get theirs. But as I said, this Liberal government has shown us time and time again that they don't support small business.
Stephanie, you talk about how there are a bunch of Canadians who want to renounce their citizenship in this country, and this is a concern. And when you're starting to hear business owners or entrepreneurs like Kim Moody coming out and saying wealth is leaving, and he's absolutely right, wealth is leaving. I want to take the position, I want to bring wealth back to business owners so they can hire more people, so we can grow and become economically viable. And that's why we have Real Talk. This is my passion, and I have a drive for this. And so what we've tried to talk to business owners about is what do we need to take as the next steps from the government perspective to a business owner, and you're speaking to hundreds of them right now. What are 2 or 3 things that business owners can do right now to get through this pandemic until we can get back to what's called a new normal?
Wow, that's really something. 2 or 3 things. Well, I mean, the first thing I would say, and I think that business owners have become more and more like this. The big wake-up call for me was when I was at the ATCO general meeting, and Nancy Southern was giving her annual address there. Pardon me, this would have been in the fall of 2018, and she said it is time for us to get politically involved. She didn't say that outright, but she basically alluded to the fact that it is time for us to be involved in our political systems because, I'm a big fan of the Leadership Institute out of Virginia. There's a famous politico there named Morton Blackwell, and he has his what are called principles of public policy. And my favorite one is personnel is policy. And for me, when I am meeting someone or learning about an organization, I'm always interested to learn about the characters who are involved, what their experiences are in. And I mean, I do this all the time. I was actually just on an interparliamentary union call 2 mornings this week. I had all sorts of representatives from this is not a good word with Conservatives right now, but the United Nations. And so I immediately go to their backgrounds to see what drives them, the way you shared your passion with me here this evening. And so, I would say that it's really time for people to get involved. Oh, yes, Morton Blackwell's what he says is personnel is policy. So whoever you put into government, that ideology will run everything, and we have seen that. So I would say that I would encourage business owners to get involved with be it your local councillor or be it at the provincial level or even at the federal level. I would say the second one would be courageous when adapting to what is the new normal. I thought for a long time things were going to go back to what they were, and that was just a function of sitting in my house for 2.5 months like everyone else. And I made the decision at the beginning of June to go to Ottawa for a sitting because I'm the type of person, type A personality that out of sheer anxiety, I could have stayed in my house forever. And I thought, no, I'm going to push myself. I'm going to get on that plane. I'm going to wear that face mask for the 8 hours it takes me to transit through Toronto. And that was the moment I realized things are never going back to how they were before. And so I would encourage entrepreneurs, and that's the amazing thing about entrepreneurs, Faisal, is that they are innovative and creative. But do what you have to do to continue operating your business in terms of creative ways for customer interaction, client interaction, product transfer, whatever it is. I would encourage you to be courageous. And 3, I would say, it's such a lame one, but I'll say it, and that is, don't give up hope. Like, how times
That's
have
not
we heard
lame,
that, right?
Stephanie.
Oh, thanks.
That,
Well,
that's not lame at
I
all.
appreciate that. Yeah, no,
I
don't
talk
give
to
up hope.
hundreds of business owners, Stephanie, and I can tell you that they all come to me and say, I am losing hope. I'm getting, the morality is going down because of not just what's happening in this country, but what's happening globally. And many business owners
Yeah,
say, I'm not going to watch the news anymore. I'm turning it off.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
want to hear any more
yeah.
depressing stuff, and they're shutting it off. But what they are concerned about is how we're spending our money federally as well. And so we do have a question that's come in from John, and John is talking about
Sure.
we're spending money on foreign aid. And I have my views about foreign aid, but I want to hear it from you on if we're in the red, if we're spending all this money to get people back into the economy, why are we still spending on foreign aid money? Why are we spending money outside of our home when we have to take care of our home first?
That's a great question. And previous to being a member of parliament, I was actually in the Canadian Foreign Service for 15 years. And so, I've done a lot of work with the distribution of development funds and sort of I've been around that. And I really, I think there is no stronger foreign aid than strong foreign policy values in Canada. And again, I'm gonna date myself here. I'm gonna go back, but when I think about Harper and Kenny and John Baird and what they did around the world to promote democracy, justice, the rule of law, in my opinion, standing up for those values internationally is just as valuable, if not more so, than foreign aid. So, if I can add, I think that this government, in addition to all of the other things that I've said about it previously, I think they've had a terrible foreign policy. It hasn't been based upon a defined set of values. I think their attitude regarding China has been terrible, and we've seen that in outcome after outcome, be it with Cobric and Spavor or the canola or the pork, all of the trade problems that we've had there. So, I tend to agree with that. We really have to seriously evaluate any money that we are sending out overseas at this time. But as I said, I really believe the best development we can do is to have a strong set of values that we enforce internationally in our diplomatic relations with all other nations.
Stephanie, we have to get going now, and I think that a message I'd like to give on the business owners that I've been speaking to. I've been speaking to hundreds of business owners in and around this city, and they all have one common theme that they would like me to say to you on behalf of them. Now, I don't represent them, but I'm just giving you their message. And their message is we need a louder voice for business owners in Ottawa. We need a business-focused government. And if there's any way that your party and any other group out there, association that can promote, help, and actually educate and inform all of the government of why small, medium-sized enterprises is the backbone of this country, we would be more than happy to do that. So if you can, on behalf of the ones that I've spoken to, please try to do as much as you can to get this government to help the small and medium-sized businesses because they do need it.
Thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful message. And we really pride ourselves on being the party of business. Another one of Kim Moody's great disciples is our finance shadow minister, Pierre Poilievre. And I think he's done a wonderful job of attempting to hold Bill Morneau to account. So I definitely will take that message back to Ottawa. It resonates with me entirely. As I said, there's no such thing as a free lunch. There are no money trees that grow in Canada. Revenue has to come from somewhere. You can't tax people until there's nothing left. That's called grease. Faisal, thank you for those messages. Thank you so much to all of the business owners and the entrepreneurs who are watching here. I believe in you, and I recognize you as the backbone of this country. I absolutely do. And you have my support in anything. Please never hesitate to reach out to me if ever there is anything I can do for you. And I'll continue to fight for not only the residents of Calgary Midnapore, the small businesses of Calgary Midnapore, but all of those across the country, Faisal. And thank you so much for having me.
Stephanie, I think everybody can learn from this task force that you've set up, and you've got a bit of an online presentation to give to everybody tomorrow. Can you give us some more details about that?
Sure. Well, I appreciate that. It's taking place at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. You can go to my Facebook page, Stephanie Kusie, on Facebook. Stephanie Kusie, politician, actually, I think it is. And I'd be happy to have you join me for that. I'll also be having our Shadow Minister, James Cummings, who has a real intricate understanding of all of the government supports related to business and has really followed the evolution of them as or devolution, I don't know, as they have come to be. So I'd be thrilled if any of you would join myself and James at that time for that presentation.
Thank you, Stephanie, so much for joining me today, taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to business owners in this city and across this country. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. You have a great evening, Faisal.
Thanks for joining us on Real Talk Live. Have yourself a great day.